"I regret not seeing you sooner," Mafia boss said as he found the maid hiding her bruises. The dawn over Eldoria was a smear of bruised purple and apricot, a sight wasted on the city below. From the 68th floor of the Valenti Tower, it probably looked like a masterpiece. Alara saw none of it. She was already inside the service elevator, the sterile scent of industrial cleaner filling her lungs, a scent she now associated with invisibility. She arrived at 5:30 in the morning, a full 30 minutes before her shift officially began. Arriving early meant the staff locker room was empty. It meant avoiding the sympathetic, curious looks from the other maids. It meant she could change into her crisp gray uniform without wincing as she lifted her arms, without anyone asking why. Alara tugged the cuff of her worn knit sweater down over her right wrist, a reflexive, useless gesture. The fabric was a poor shield against the deep, throbbing ache in her forearm. It was a new addition, this one, a partner to the fading yellow-green stain on her ribs. She moved with a practiced slowness, a deliberate economy of motion that disguised the pain. Her mantra began, the same one every morning. Be invisible. Be quiet. Do your work. Go home. Invisibility was key, especially when it came to her employer, Lorenzo Valenti. He was not just the owner of the penthouse. He was the gravity that held the entire tower, the entire city block, in his orbit. A man who built an empire on iron principles and silent control. Alara had worked here for 6 months and had seen him perhaps 4 times. He rarely spoke to staff. He did not need to. When he entered a room, the air pressure changed. Security men, thick-necked and watchful, would stiffen. Conversations would die. His presence was a physical weight, a shadow that passed, and Alara had perfected the art of melting into the wallpaper whenever that shadow drew near. She was assigned to the main dining room today, a cavernous space of glass and chrome overlooking the city. Her task was polishing the silver, a job she normally found meditative, but today, the weight of a heavy candelabrum felt cold and threatening in her hands. The intricate scrollwork blurred. She was not in the penthouse. Suddenly, she was back in her old apartment, 6 months ago. The air was thick with the smell of Jared's cheap cologne and stale beer. He had her wrist in his grip, the same one that now throbbed, his voice, slick and persuasive, wrapping around her fear. "It's easy. Alara, you just prop the service door. They won't even notice. These people have insurance for this. It's nothing to them." He'd smiled then, a smile that never reached his cold eyes. He'd produced a small, filed piece of metal. "You work in these places. You're invisible. It's perfect. You just walk right in, do your job, and leave a little opening for me." "I can't," she'd whispered, trying to pull away. His grip had tightened, his knuckles white. "You can. Or does Caleb like it in that halfway house? I hear the food is terrible. It would be a shame if something happened, a violation, and he went right back inside." Her silence was his weapon. Her love for her younger brother was his key. She'd done it, twice. At 2 different homes before she'd gotten the job at the Valenti Tower, the guilt was a heavier, darker stain than any tarnish she polished away. Jared hadn't just hit her. He'd made her an accomplice. He'd poisoned her, and now he was extorting her, demanding a cut of her meager paycheck to keep quiet, to keep her brother safe. The bruises were just reminders of who held the power. A sharp ding from the private elevator in the main foyer snapped her back to the present. Alara jolted, her head snapping toward the sound. The heavy silver candlestick slipped, and she fumbled to catch it, a gasp of pain escaping as she knocked her sore arm against the edge of the sideboard. She froze, her heart hammering, invisible. Lorenzo Valenti stood in the foyer, watching her. He was in his study, a fortress of glass and muted gray, reviewing overnight shipping reports from the docks. He valued order. He despised weakness. He did not tolerate disruptions. He had been walking toward the kitchen for his morning espresso when the private elevator chimed. He saw the new maid, Alara, his mind supplied, her file photo bland and forgettable, react. It was not a startle. It was a full-body recoil, as if the sound were a gunshot. Her head snapped toward the elevator, eyes wide with a feral terror that was entirely disproportionate to the event. Then she'd fumbled the silver, her body twisting in a way that was both defensive and pained. He filed the observation away. He continued to the kitchen. Later that morning, he saw her again. He was walking through the main gallery, discussing a security detail with Matteo. His second in command, Alara was dusting a marble sculpture. Her back to them, a kitchen staffer, new and nervous, pushed a heavy catering cart filled with bottled water and ice toward the terrace. He was moving too fast. "Watch it," Matteo said, his voice a low rumble. The staffer swerved, avoiding his boss, but the metal corner of the cart grazed the wall. Alara, trapped between the cart and the wall, pressed herself flat. The cart didn't hit her, but it brushed her uniform. Lorenzo saw it. She did not cry out. She just folded. A silent grimace, a sharp, hidden intake of breath. A hand moving to her ribs, clutching the spot under her arm, her knuckles white. She thought no one saw. Lorenzo saw. He saw the way she bit her lip until the color drained from it. He saw the fine tremor in her hand as she resumed dusting the sculpture, her movements suddenly stiff, jerky. Something was broken. And Lorenzo Valenti did not tolerate broken things in his home. His home was a sanctuary, a fortress. This visible, trembling fear was a crack in the foundation. The long day bled into a quiet, heavy evening. The penthouse, usually alive with the hum of business and the quiet efficiency of the staff, grew still. The city lights below became a diamond scatter against the black glass. Alara had been finishing her shift, her body one singular, screaming ache, just one more hour. She had been taking a bag of discarded linens to the service laundry chute. The corridor was dim, away from the opulence of the main rooms. The pain in her side, which had been a dull throb, suddenly sharpened. It felt like a hot knife. She stumbled, bracing herself against the cool drywall, the rough linen bag dropping to the floor. A sob, hot and unexpected, pushed up her throat. She choked it back, but it was too late. The dam of her control, so meticulously maintained all day, finally broke. She couldn't breathe. She slid down the wall, clutching her side, the tears she'd refused to shed now burning tracks down her cheeks. She was shaking, not from cold, but from sheer, agonizing exhaustion. She did not hear the footsteps. His shoes, handmade Italian leather, made no sound on the polished stone. "You're injured." The voice was not a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the cold finality of a judge's gavel. Alara's head snapped up. He was there. Lorenzo Valenti, standing not 10 feet away, his dark suit immaculate, his expression unreadable. He looked carved from the same marble as the hallway. The terror that flashed through her was worse than the pain. It was primal. "Mr. Valenti," she gasped, scrambling to her feet. The movement tore a sound from her, a hissed intake of breath. She grabbed the linen bag, her face flaming with shame. "I'm sorry. I'm fine. I'm leaving." "You're lying." He stepped closer. The corridor, which had seemed wide, suddenly felt like a tomb. His presence was suffocating. She smelled the expensive, clean scent of his cologne and something else, something metallic and sharp, like power. He saw the tear tracks on her cheek. He saw the pallor of her skin. His gaze dropped to her right arm, the one clutching the bag. The sleeve of her uniform, usually buttoned, had ridden up in her fall, exposing the pale skin of her forearm just below the elbow, and the bruise. It was not the one from this morning. This one was older, a sickly, mottled yellow and green, but its edges were stark against her skin. Before she could react, he moved. His hand shot out, not violently, but with a swift, undeniable purpose. He didn't grab her. He simply curled his long, strong fingers around the fabric of her sleeve. Alara froze, a trapped animal. "Don't," she whispered. It was a plea that died in the air. He ignored it. He pushed the sleeve up her arm. It was not just one bruise, it was a constellation of them, old and new, a dark, violent purple staining the soft skin of her inner forearm, and higher, near her elbow, the distinct, ugly, fading shape of a handprint, a cold, precise anger settled in Lorenzo's chest. This was filth. This was chaos. This was a stain on his world. Someone had dared to bring this disorder into his home, onto his staff, under his roof. He lifted his eyes from her arm to her face. She was trembling, her eyes wide and wet, her breath coming in shallow pants. She looked like she was about to shatter. His voice was low, tight, resonating with a finality that brooked no argument. "Who did this to you?" Alara stared at him, her chest heaving. She looked from his eyes, dark, unreadable pits, down to the exposed, shameful marks on her arm. This was it. This was the end. He would fire her. Or worse, he would ask questions. He would call the police. And Jared would... Caleb. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't speak. "Answer me," he commanded, his voice dropping even lower. She did the only thing she could. She ripped her arm from his light grip. The linen bag fell. She ran. She fled down the corridor, her soft-soled shoes slipping on the polish, ignoring the explosion of pain in her ribs. She pushed through the heavy service door and disappeared into the concrete stairwell, her footsteps echoing frantically in the descent. Lorenzo did not follow. He stood alone in the dim hallway. The image of her terror and those bruises burned into his mind. He looked down at the abandoned bag of linens, then, slowly, deliberately, he pulled out his phone. He dialed a single number. Matteo answered on the first ring. "Matteo." Lorenzo's voice was ice. "The maid. Alara. The one from the gallery this morning. I want everything on her. I want to know where she lives, who she talks to, what she eats for breakfast. I want it by morning." He paused, his gaze fixed on the service door she had disappeared through. "And change her shift, starting tomorrow. She's on the residence rotation. My floor only. I want her where I can see her." He hung up. He did not need to explain. Alara didn't stop running until she was 2 blocks from the subway station, her lungs burning in the cold night air. She was fired. She had to be. She had run from Lorenzo Valenti. Her apartment was small, the walls paper-thin, in a neighborhood that Eldoria's elite pretended did not exist. She shared it with 2 other women she barely knew. She fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking so hard it took 3 tries to get the lock to turn. She pushed the door open, exhaustion hitting her like a physical blow. The apartment was dark and quiet. She leaned against the door, closing her eyes, just for a second, and then she saw it. A piece of white paper, folded neatly, tucked under the door, visible on the worn linoleum. Not an envelope, just a note. Her blood went cold. He'd been here. She stumbled forward and picked it up. The handwriting was sharp. Angry, slanted, Jared's 4 words. "1 word and your brother goes back to prison. Not 1 word to the cops. Just 1 word." He meant 1 word to anyone. He meant Lorenzo Valenti. He must have been watching her. He knew. He knew she was close to breaking, and he was yanking the leash. She sank to the floor, the note rattling in her trembling hand. She couldn't even cry. She was hollowed out, trapped between a man who would kill her brother to silence her, and a man who had seen the truth she was trying to hide. She went to work the next morning on pure, hollow adrenaline. She walked through the staff entrance expecting to be met by security. She expected to be handed her final paycheck and escorted from the building. Instead, her supervisor, Mrs. Davies, met her at the clock-in station. Her face was a mask of confusion and pinched disapproval. "Alara," she tapped her clipboard, "you're being reassigned, effective immediately." Alara's stomach dropped. "Reassigned? Where?" "Mr. Valenti's personal suite, the penthouse level. Mrs." Davies looked baffled and, frankly, annoyed. "He requested you personally. You'll be the only one handling his private study and bedroom. It's a significant promotion, a pay bump of 15%. Alara's blood ran colder than it had last night. It was not a promotion. It was a cage. He wasn't firing her. He was pulling her closer. She had run, and he had simply built a smaller, more secure box and placed her inside it. I don't understand," Alara whispered. "Neither do I." "Mrs." Davies sniffed. "But you don't question Mr. Valenti. Get your supplies from the main closet. You start now." His personal suite was vast and silent. It occupied the entire top floor, a space of towering glass windows, dark wood, and muted, expensive fabrics. It smelled like him, that scent of expensive cologne, old books, and the metallic tang of power. She spent an hour in his study, her hands shaking so violently she could barely dust his immaculate, stadium-sized desk. She avoided the few photographs. She focused on the rows of leather-bound books, aligning their spines with a trembling finger. She was straightening a heavy silver inkwell when the door opened without a sound. He was there. He had changed from the precise suit of yesterday into a simple black cashmere sweater and dark, tailored pants. He looked less like a boss and more like a predator in his own den. He didn't speak. He just watched her. Alara's heart hammered against her sore ribs. "Mr. Valenti, I was just finishing the desk. I know what you're doing." His voice was quiet, but it filled the cavernous room, drowning out the distant city hum. He walked to his desk, but his eyes, dark and analytical, never left her. "I'm cleaning, sir." "You're hiding." He leaned a hip against the desk, crossing his arms. The posture was casual, but the energy coming from him was coiled and intense. "You're hurt. You ran. And last night, you went home to your apartment and found a note tucked under your door." Alara dropped the dust cloth. The air left her lungs in a silent whoosh. How did you—" "My people are very good." He stated it as a simple fact, like the sky being blue. His report had been on his desk at 4 a.m. Jared, the extortion, the brother. Caleb in a halfway house upstate. They are not, however, as good as I am. I already knew what they were going to find. I saw it in your eyes last night. He took a step toward her. She took a step back, her calves hitting the solid wood of the bookshelf. Trapped. "I asked you a question last night," he said, his voice softer now, almost gentle. The shift was more terrifying than his anger. "I'm asking you again. Who is doing this to you, Alara?" He was standing directly in front of her now, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. She had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. She could see the faint lines around his eyes, the absolute, unwavering certainty in them. He was not a man who accepted no. He was not a man who tolerated unanswered questions. Jared's note, one word, her brother's face, smiling his naive, hopeful smile in the visiting room last month. Tears welled again, hot and stinging, blurring the imposing figure in front of her. She couldn't look at him. She dropped her gaze, staring at the third button on his black sweater. She was breaking apart. Right here, in this fortress of a room, in front of the most dangerous man in Eldoria. She finally found her voice, a threadbare whisper that was all she had left, the last tattered remnant of her will. "Please," she begged, the word tearing from her throat. "Please don't ask me questions I can't afford to answer." His world was built on the meticulous observation of details. A flicker of an eye, a hesitation in a man's voice, the fractional difference in weight of a shipment. Lorenzo Valenti missed nothing, and now, Alara was the most compelling and infuriating. Detail in his home, his order to move her to his floor had been a strategic one. Proximity meant observation, and observe her he did. From the quiet of his study, he watched her. She was a ghost in his machine. She moved through his private rooms with a quiet diligence that soothed his innate need for order. She did not just wipe surfaces, she restored them. She aligned the spines of the books he left on his nightstand. She replaced a pen he'd carelessly tossed aside, setting it perfectly parallel to the edge of his leather desk blotter. She had integrity in her work. She was also profoundly, visibly kind. He watched her one afternoon as a young, nervous housekeeper came to deliver fresh towels. Almost dropping the heavy stack, Alara had rushed to help, her voice a low, gentle murmur. "It's all right. Let me get that side. They're heavier than they look." She smiled at the girl. It was a genuine smile, soft and warm, and as she lifted her share of the linens, Lorenzo saw the smile falter. He saw the sharp, involuntary wince. the tightening of her lips as the movement pulled at her bruised ribs. The mask of normalcy was paper thin, and the pain beneath it was constant. She was trying to smile through agony. It was a strength he recognized. It was a vulnerability he could not tolerate. That afternoon, he met Matteo in the private gym, a sterile space of steel and glass. Matteo, his second-in-command, was a man of cold logic, the ballast to Lorenzo's calculated intensity. Jared Kovac, Lorenzo said, not breaking rhythm as he methodically worked the heavy bag. His voice was flat, the name an irrelevance. Matteo stood, arms crossed, watching. He's scum. Lorenzo, a parasite with a restraining order from 2 states ago and priors for assault and petty theft. He's nothing. You want him gone. I'll have him gone by midnight. He'll be a bad memory. No. Lorenzo's fist connected with the bag, a sharp crack that echoed in the room. A memory is still a presence. I want to know why he felt bold enough to send a threat into my building. A man this small, this desperate. He's not acting alone. Matteo's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. You're taking a personal interest. The last time you took an interest this personal, we had a war with the Scalini family. This isn't personal, Lorenzo said, unleashing a rapid, brutal combination. It's pest control. Pests get exterminated, Matteo said, his voice a low warning. You're studying this one. You've got the girl under surveillance. You've got this leech under surveillance. You're getting close to this, boss. Lorenzo stopped, breathing deeply, the bag swaying. He turned, wiping his brow with a towel. Are you questioning my judgment? I'm protecting it, Matteo replied evenly. Vulnerabilities aren't always bullets. Sometimes they look like that. He nodded toward the ceiling, toward the penthouse suite above them where Alara was. At that moment, cleaning Lorenzo's shower. She's a distraction, a soft target. Let me remove the problem. You will trace his phone, Lorenzo ordered, his voice dropping to the level that allowed no argument. You will identify every person he has contacted in the last week. You will find out who he's working for. And you will not touch him until I give the word. That is all. Matteo held his gaze for a long moment, then gave a single, curt nod. As you say, boss. 2 days later, Alara found herself in the main laundry room on the service level. It was the one place she felt she could breathe, surrounded by the industrial hum of the dryers and the sharp, clean smell of bleach. She was folding a set of high-thread count sheets, the fabric cool and smooth under her hands. Her burner phone, a cheap, untraceable model Jared had forced her to carry, vibrated in her uniform pocket. Her blood ran cold. He never called during her shift. She ducked between 2 towering shelves of folded linens, her heart hammering. She pulled out the phone and answered, her voice a terrified whisper. What do you want? What do I want? Jared's voice was slick, oily, laced with a new, terrifying confidence. I want what I'm owed, and I'm tired of waiting. Alara, that $500 a week isn't cutting it anymore. Jared, I don't have any more. They just pay me my wage. Oh, but you're in the big man's apartment now, aren't you? I see you. I know where you are. You must be doing more than cleaning. Alara felt sick. Stop? What do you want? I want $5,000. By tomorrow. A gasp escaped her. 5? Jared, that's impossible. I'd have to steal it, and he'd know. These people, they're not like the others. They'll kill me. That sounds like your problem, he sneered. 5,000, by 5 o'clock tomorrow, or I'm coming to see your boss. I'll walk right into the lobby and ask for you. I'll tell him all about his new favorite maid, and I'll tell him all about little Caleb. I might even pay him a visit myself. How'd you like that? The threat, so open, so direct, stole the air from her lungs. She pressed her forehead against the cool metal shelving, the world tilting. No, she begged, the word a sob. Jared, please, don't come here. Please, I'll get it. I swear, I'll find a way. Just don't come here. Tomorrow. Alara, 5 o'clock. The line went dead. She stood frozen, the phone in her hand, the hum of the dryers fading into a dull roar in her ears. He was going to expose her. He was going to destroy her life and her brother's. At that exact moment, in his study, 68 floors above, Lorenzo Valenti hit the pause button on the digital recording of the call. Matteo stood by the window, his arms crossed. The conversation had been routed directly from the building's encrypted surveillance system. Lorenzo's face was a mask of cold fury. "He threatened my building," Lorenzo said, his voice dangerously quiet. "He threatened her, on my property, using my airspace." "He's a fool," Matteo said. "He just gave us everything. The trace is active. He made the call from a burner, but the cell tower ping puts him 3 blocks from here. He's watching us." "I don't just want his location," Lorenzo said. "He's feeling bold. That means he has backing. I want to know who it is. I want a name for every number he's contacted in the last 48 hours. Now." Matteo nodded and left the room, his movements swift. Lorenzo sat alone in the silence. The recording of Alara's terrified, whispered plea replaying in his mind. "Please, I'll get it, I swear." He closed his eyes, a muscle in his jaw clenching. He had built an empire to keep the predators of the world at bay, and one had been living under his nose, feeding on one of his own. That evening, Alara was a wreck. She moved through her duties in the penthouse kitchen in a fog of panic. She should have left hours ago, but the thought of going home to her empty, insecure apartment was unbearable. At least here, in this fortress of glass and steel, Jared couldn't physically reach her. She was wiping down stainless steel counters that were already spotless, her mind racing. How could she get $5,000? Steal? From Lorenzo Valenti? The thought was so absurd it was almost laughable. It would be suicide. Her hands were shaking. She had been tasked with prepping a fruit platter for Mr. Valenti's late-night snack, a duty she normally found calming. She picked up a small, sharp paring knife to slice a lime. Her mind flashed to Jared's face, his sneer. The knife slipped. It carved a sharp, clean red line across the heel of her left palm. It was an underscore T, deep, but it was sudden, and it was bloody. She gasped, dropping the knife with a clatter. She clenched her hand, blood welling up, and rushed to the deep industrial sink, turning on the cold water. She held her hand under the stream, watching as the water swirled with a sickening pink. "You're working late." She jumped, spinning around, her heart leaping into her throat. He was standing in the kitchen doorway, watching her. He was no longer in his suit, but in the same black cashmere sweater and dark pants as before. He looked less like a boss and more like a shadow. "Mr. Valenti," she stammered, instinctively hiding her bleeding hand behind her back. "I'm sorry. I was just finishing up." His eyes flickered from her face to the sink, to the single drop of blood that had fallen on the white marble floor. "You're bleeding," he said. It wasn't an accusation, it was a fact. "It's nothing, just a scratch. I'll clean it up." "Show me your hand." It was the same tone he'd used in the hallway, a quiet, absolute command. This time, she didn't run. Her fear of Jared had eclipsed her fear of him, leaving her strangely numb. Slowly, she brought her hand from behind her back. He stepped into the bright kitchen light. He didn't say a word. He just took her wrist, his grip firm but not painful, and turned her hand over to inspect the cut. "This is not a scratch," he said. He guided her, not ungently, to one of the tall steel stools at the prep island. "Sit." She sat, watching in a daze as he went to a polished chrome cabinet and retrieved a first aid kit. It was not a normal kit. It looked medical grade, clinical and severe. He brought it to the counter and opened it, his movements economical and precise. He took her hand again, his touch strangely impersonal. He cleaned the wound with an antiseptic wipe. It stung, and she hissed, trying to pull away. His grip tightened just enough to hold her steady. "Sorry," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through her skin. He didn't look at her face. His entire formidable focus was on her hand. He was so close. She could smell that clean, expensive scent again. She could see the fine, dark stubble on his jaw, the concentration in his dark eyes. His touch was slow, deliberate, As he applied a sterile pad, his thumb brushed the soft, uninjured skin of her palm. It wasn't a caress. It felt more like a calibration. He was reading her, feeling the tremor that ran through her. He wrapped the gauze, his movements methodical. He taped it securely, his large, strong hands surprisingly gentle. For a man of his reputation, his touch was almost tender. The silence in the kitchen stretched, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. He finished, but he didn't let go of her hand. He just looked at the neat, white bandage. "Thank you," Alara whispered, her voice sounding small and foreign in the vast room. "I don't like blood in my kitchen," he said, his voice flat. He released her, and she pulled her hand to her chest. He began to pack the kit away. The contrast was too much. The terror from Jared's call, and the unexpected gentle care from this dangerous man. It all spilled over. "You're too kind," she whispered, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. For someone with blood on his hands. It was reckless. It was stupid. She had accused him. She froze, expecting anger, expecting him to fire her. Lorenzo stopped, his back to her. He didn't turn, but she saw his shoulders tense. He slowly closed the kit, the click of the latch sounding like a gunshot in the silence. He turned, and his face was unreadable, but his eyes were dark, intense. He looked down at her. "The blood on my hands," he said, his voice low, "is from choices I have made, to protect my family, to build my business. I own every last drop." He took a step closer. She instinctively leaned away. "The bruises on your arms," he continued, "are from a choice that was made for you. By a coward. By a parasite who enjoys hurting things that can't fight back." He was in front of her now, so close she had to crane her neck to look up at him. "I regret not seeing you sooner," he said, his voice a raw, as quiet intensity that hit her harder than a physical blow. I don't know what you mean." "I regret not seeing you," he clarified. "In the hallway, in the dining room, I would have stopped him, before he ever put his hands on you, before he even learned your name." Panic, pure and cold, shot through her. This was not a rescue. This was possession. This was the same kind of control Jared demanded, just packaged in wealth and power. It was suffocating. She slid off the stool, backing away. "I have to go. My shift is over. Thank you for the bandage." She turned and fled, heading for the service door, the same way she had run from him before. She grabbed the handle, but before she could pull, his hand was there, flat against the steel, slamming it shut. He didn't touch her. He just blocked the exit, his body an immovable wall. "He's not going to hurt you again," he said. It was not a comfort. It was a decree. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking, the tears she'd been fighting all day finally spilling over. She was trapped. "You can't just order him away. He'll hurt my brother. He'll ruin everything. You don't know him." "No." His voice was soft, but it cut through her panic. "You don't know me." He lifted a hand, and she flinched, but he didn't touch her. He just looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "No one is ever going to hurt you again." "That is my word, Alara, and I do not break my word." He saw her trembling. He saw her breaking apart, and in that moment he acted. He was not a man of soft words. He was a man of action. He reached for her, and this time she didn't have time to run. He pulled her in. It wasn't a request. It was a statement. One arm circled her waist, pulling her flush against the hard, warm wall of his chest. His other hand moved to the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her soft, loose hair, cradling her skull, protecting her. Alara went rigid. Her hands came up to his chest, ready to push, to fight. This was wrong. This was dangerous. This was what Jared did, grabbing her, holding her, taking. But this was different. He wasn't grabbing. He wasn't demanding. He was holding. His hand on her head was protective. His arm around her was a shield. He was solid. He was warm. He wasn't taking anything. He was simply holding her, as if to keep her from falling apart, the wall she had built around herself, the one that held back the years of pain and fear. It didn't just crack, it disintegrated. A sob, raw and agonizing, tore from her throat. She sagged against him, the fight, the panic, the terror, all draining out of her, leaving her weak. Her hands, which had been poised to push him away, uncurled. Her fingers gripped the soft, expensive cashmere of his sweater. She turned her head, pressing her face into his chest, hiding from the world. She could feel his heart, a steady, strong, slow beat beneath her ear. It was the only solid thing in her world. She breathed him in, clean, expensive, and imposque styles. This was wrong. This was her boss. This was a dangerous, violent man. But she didn't want to let go. Lorenzo held her, absorbing the small, violent tremors that racked her body. He felt the exact moment she surrendered, the tension leaving her body as she collapsed against him. It was not a victory. It was a responsibility. It was a weight that settled on his shoulders, familiar and heavy. He closed his eyes, a cold, dark, and possessive resolve settling over him. He had given his word. Across the street, 2 blocks down, Jared Kovach sat in the driver's seat of a rusted blue sedan. The inside of the car smelled like fast food and stale cigarettes. He was agitated, his knee bouncing. He stared up at the penthouse, a single floor of light against the black sky. He picked up his burner phone and dialed. "Yeah, it's me," he snapped. "She's still up there. He's got her. No, she hasn't come out." "What do you mean, be patient? I want my money." "No, she won't talk. She's too scared of me. She'll do what I say." "Yeah, I'll wait. But you just make sure you're ready when I give the signal. This Valenti bastard isn't the only one with friends." He ended the call, his thumb tapping a nervous rhythm on the cheap plastic, his eyes fixed on the distant, glittering cage. The embrace in the kitchen had been a tectonic shift. When Lorenzo finally, slowly released her, Alara had felt untethered, as if the only thing holding her upright had just stepped away. He had simply looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable, and said, "Go home. Get some rest." She had. But the next morning, everything was different. When she stepped out of her apartment building into the gray morning light, a black, immaculate sedan was parked at the curb. Not a taxi. It was a high-end, severe-looking car with tinted windows that seemed to drink the light. A man in a dark suit, built like a refrigerator, stepped out from the driver's side. "Miss Alara?" His voice was polite, flat and final. Alara froze. I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong... Mr. Valenti arranged your transport," he said. He was not asking. He walked around and opened the rear door, holding it for her. "I take the subway," she said, her voice small, her hands clutching her bag. The man, Rico. She would learn his name was... Didn't argue. He just held the door, his expression unchanged, waiting. The message was clear. This was not a request. This was not a choice. This was an order, delivered through a layer of polite steel. She got in the car. The door closed with a heavy, soundproof thud, sealing her inside. The interior was plush black leather and smelled faintly of polish. The ride was silent, smooth. She felt as if she were in a hearse or a bank vault. She was safer than she had ever been in her life, and she had never felt more trapped. This continued for 3 days. Rico was there in the morning. He was there in the evening. He was a silent, immovable presence at work. The other staff noticed. She saw the whispers, the quick, curious glances. She was no longer just Alara the maid. She was the girl in the boss's private car. She was being isolated. She was being marked in his attempt to protect her. Lorenzo was claiming her. She was becoming a possession, a kept woman in a gilded cage. It was the same suffocation Jared had perfected, just with a more expensive veneer. She began to feel safer. Yes. The constant gnawing fear of Jared appearing at her door began to recede, but it was replaced by a new, creeping dread. She was losing what little of herself she had left. On the 4th evening, she didn't wait for him to dismiss her. She went to his study. He was at his desk, a glass of dark amber liquid beside a stack of reports. He looked up when she entered, his gaze calm, almost welcoming. "Mr. Valenti," her voice shook, but she held it as steady as she could. "Alara, I can't," she began, her hands twisting the strap of her bag. "The car, the driver, I appreciate. I appreciate the thought, but I cannot accept it. He leaned back in his chair, lacing his fingers over his chest. It is not a gift. Alara, it is a security measure. It's too much, she insisted, desperation creeping into her voice. They're looking at me. They're whispering. I don't want your pity. The word pity landed in the room and lay there, heavy and offensive. Lorenzo's expression hardened. The warmth she'd imagined she'd seen vanished, replaced by that familiar, cold intensity. He stood, slowly. He was a large man, and his presence seemed to suck the air from the room. He walked around the massive desk until he was standing just a few feet from her. "Is that what you believe this is?" he asked, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "Pity." She flinched but held her ground. "What else would it be? I'm your maid. You found out I have a problem, so you feel sorry for me. But I'm not a charity case." He was close now. So close she could feel the heat from his body. "Pity is a useless emotion," he said, his voice hard. "It's a weakness. I do not feel it, and I do not tolerate it in my organization." "Then why?" she whispered, her resolve crumbling under his gaze. "Why are you doing this?" He looked at her, his dark eyes seeming to strip away every layer of her defense, seeing the fear, the desperation, and the small, defiant spark that refused to die. "Because this isn't pity," he said, his voice dropping, becoming almost rough. "It's protection, and I don't protect people I don't care about." The admission hung between them, stark and absolute. It was not a declaration of love. It was a statement of fact, as cold and hard as the glass windows behind him. He had laid a claim. He cared. Therefore, she was his to protect. Her arguments died in her throat. She had no answer for that. The air between them changed after that. The pretense of boss and maid was still there, a thin, transparent sheet. But beneath it, something else was moving. A current dark and heavy. He watched her constantly. When she was in his suite, dusting his bookshelves or making his bed, she could feel his eyes on her. He wasn't leering. He was studying. One evening, a violent storm broke over Eldoria. The sky turned a dark, bruised green, and the rain came down in sheets, slamming against the penthouse windows. Ilara had always loved storms. They were the only thing that felt as loud and chaotic as she felt on the inside. She thought he had left for the night. She finished her duties and was drawn to the massive, covered balcony that wrapped around the suite. She stepped out, the wind immediately whipping at her, cold and wet. It was loud, the roar of the wind and the percussive drumming of the rain drowning out the city, drowning out her thoughts. She walked to the edge, gripping the cold, wet stone railing, and tilted her face up to the stinging mist. "You'll catch cold," she gasped, spinning around. He was there, standing in the doorway, a silhouette against the warm light of the study. He was in his shirt sleeves, his tie gone, his collar unbuttoned. He hadn't left at all. "I'm sorry," she stammered, her heart hammering. "I thought you were gone. I was just leaving." "I know," he said, his voice calm, unbothered. He walked out onto the balcony, joining her. The wind immediately tousled his dark hair. He stood beside her, not speaking, just looking out at the chaos of the storm. A particularly violent gust of wind drove the rain sideways, plastering Alara's thin uniform shirt to her skin and whipping her hair across her face, stinging her eyes. She shivered, trying to push the wet strands away. He moved. He turned, stepping in front of her, shielding her from the worst of the wind with his body, and then he lifted his hand. He moved with an agonizing slowness, as if giving her every possible second to pull away, to protest. She couldn't. She just watched. Her breath caught in her throat. His fingers, warm and slightly rough, brushed the wet hair from her cheek. His thumb stroked, just once, across the skin under her eye. It was a gesture of such profound, unexpected tenderness that it broke her. She closed her eyes. "Ilara," he whispered. She opened her eyes. He was looking at her, his face unreadable in the stormy light, but his eyes were dark with an intensity that had nothing to do with anger. He was closer. His gaze dropped to her mouth. He was waiting. He was the most powerful, dangerous man she had ever met, and he was waiting for her permission. She didn't know how to give it. She didn't know how to do anything but stand there, trembling, held in place by his gaze and the electric warmth of his hand on her face. He leaned in. The last few inches were an eternity. His lips met hers. It was not a kiss of passion. It was not demanding, or bruising, or hungry. It was a question. It was a search. His lips were warm, firm, and impossibly gentle. It was a kiss that tasted of the faint, expensive whiskey on his breath and the cold, clean rain. He moved slowly, a soft, hesitant pressure, as if he were trying to memorize the feel of her. A small, broken sound escaped her throat. This was madness. This was her boss. This was a man who lived in a world of violence and shadows, but he was also the only man who had ever touched her with such care. She kissed him back. It was just as hesitant. Her lips, chapped and cold, moved against her hands, which had been clenched at her sides, came up. She didn't know what to do. She grabbed his shirt, bunching the expensive material in her fists. She wasn't pulling him closer. She was holding on, clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing in the middle of the storm. She was afraid to fall, and he was the only anchor she had. The kiss deepened, just slightly. His hand moved from her cheek to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her damp hair, holding her steady. His other arm came around her waist, pulling her flush against him. He was so warm. He was solid rock. He absorbed the tremor that ran through her when he finally, slowly, pulled back. They were both breathing as if they'd been running. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "Alara!" He breathed again, his voice a rough, low sound. That was all. He didn't have to say anything else. The next day, Alara was at the penthouse, in a daze. The world looked different, sharper, more dangerous, and yet, for the first time, hopeful. She was safe in the tower. Jared was not. He was downtown, outside her apartment building, wired on cheap amphetamines and pure, simmering rage. She hadn't answered his calls. His threats were being ignored. He had lost control, and it was driving him insane. He jimmied the cheap, flimsy lock on her apartment door in under 10 seconds and burst inside. "Alara!" The apartment was empty, stale, silent. "Bitch," he hissed, his eyes darting around. He was looking for money, for anything he could sell. He swept his arm across her rickety dresser, sending her few belongings, a bottle of cheap lotion, a hairbrush, a few coins clattering to the floor. A small, cloth-bound book, tucked under a stack of worn T-shirts, fell to the ground. Jared stared at it. A journal. He scoffed, kicking it, but then he paused. He bent down and picked it up, flipping through the pages of neat, careful handwriting. It was pathetic. Pages and pages of her fears, her worries. Then a name caught his eye. Caleb. He read the passage, his eyes widening, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "Told Caleb I'd visit on Tuesday," he read aloud, his voice a mocking whisper. So hard for him at the Crestview Recovery halfway house. He just wants to come home. "I told him to be strong." He didn't need the address, though he scanned for it. The name was enough. Crestview Recovery, this was it. This was better than $5,000. This was control. This was the leash, right back in his hand. He ripped the page from the journal, folded it, and shoved it deep into his pocket. He left the apartment, whistling. The kiss had changed everything. The air in the penthouse was charged, heavy. Lorenzo found it harder to work. He kept finding his gaze drawn to her as she moved through his rooms. He knew, with a cold certainty, that the small, quiet moment on the balcony had been a turning point. He also knew it was not enough. He was protecting her body, but Jared still had her mind. He still had her fear. He found her in the study that evening, straightening the books she had straightened that morning. She was restless, nervous. "He will get desperate," Lorenzo said quietly. She turned, startled. "Jared." "He knows he's losing his hold on you. He'll do something reckless. I need you to tell me exactly what he has on your brother." Her face went pale. I told you, Caleb's on probation." You told me part of it, Lorenzo said, his voice gentle but insistent. He stepped closer. I had my lawyers pull the file. Theft, 18 months, time served, but the file is clean. Too clean. It's missing the original complaint. It's missing the details. He looked at her, his eyes searching. Tell me what really happened. Alara, I cannot fight a shadow. I need the truth. She looked at him, at the man who had kissed her in the rain, at the man who had promised her his protection. She took a deep, shuddering breath, and she told him, It wasn't Caleb's theft, she whispered, her gaze dropping to the floor. It was Jared's. She told him everything, the years of control, the escalating violence. I tried to leave him. He found out. He hit me. So hard. Across the side of my head, I couldn't see out of my left eye for 2 days. It was just black, and then yellow. I thought I was blind. She was shaking, reliving it, her hand unconsciously going to her temple. Caleb found me. He's younger than me, but he has a terrible temper. He went after Jared. He found him at a bar. He beat him, badly, as he should have, Lorenzo said, his voice a low growl. No, she said, tears welling. Jared called the police, but not on Caleb for the assault. He told them Caleb had been stealing from him. Jared he'd done a break-in, a house. He had all this stolen jewelry. He planted it in Caleb's room. He told the police Caleb had a drug problem and had stolen from him to pay for it. She was crying openly now, the shame and the injustice of it pouring out of her. It was Jared's word against Caleb's. Caleb. He'd been in trouble before. Minor things. He had a public defender. They told him to take a deal. So he did. He pled guilty to the theft to avoid a bigger sentence. He served 18 months. For something Jared did. She looked up at him, her face a mask of agony. He got out 3 months ago. He's at the halfway house. He's on probation for 5 years. One call from Jared, one hint that he's violating. And Caleb goes back. For the full 5 years. Jared, he holds my brother's life in his hands. Lorenzo just stood there, his face a mask of stone, but his eyes were burning. A cold, quiet, murderous rage that was more terrifying than any shouting. He stepped forward, not with the tenderness of the balcony, but with a new, hard purpose. He put his hands on her shoulders, his grip firm, grounding her. Thank you, he said, his voice rough. This is what I needed. He pulled her into a brief, hard embrace. I'm going to fix this. I will have my legal team find the evidence. I will find the original victim of that theft. I will get your brother's conviction overturned, and I will make Jared Kovach disappear. He pulled back, looking her in the eyes. But I will do it cleanly. No bloodshed, for you. I give you my word. Later that night, Matteo found Lorenzo in his office, staring out at the city lights. The orders have been given, Lorenzo said, not turning. Our legal team is on it. I want investigators on the ground in her old neighborhood. Find the original police report on that break-in. Find the victim. I want Caleb's name cleared, and I want Kovach contained. Matteo stood by the door, his face grim. Lorenzo, this is a mistake. You're using the organization's resources. Our best lawyers, our A-team investigators, to clean up a domestic dispute for a maid. She is not a maid, Lorenzo said, his voice flat. She's a liability, Matteo countered, his tone urgent. You're getting emotionally involved. You're exposing us, our rivals. The Scalinas, they look for any sign of weakness, any distraction. If they see you using your best assets to protect her, they will see it as an opening. They will move. Lorenzo was silent for a long moment. He turned from the window, his face in shadow. She is not a weakness, Matteo. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room with absolute, cold finality. She is mine, and I protect what is mine. He stepped into the light, his eyes flat and cold as steel. If they see this as an opening, then let them come. Alara was in the new apartment, a secure, clean, sterile two-bedroom unit in a high-rise halfway across the city. It had been arranged by Lorenzo's staff for your safety. The polite, cold assistant had told her. It was another cage, just one with a better view. She was sitting on the beige sofa, staring at the wall. The kiss on the balcony felt like a dream. The confession in the study felt like a nightmare. Her burner phone, the one she'd been afraid to throw away, vibrated on the coffee table. She hadn't heard from Jared in days, not since Lorenzo had taken over. A new message, from a number she didn't recognize. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. She opened the message. It was a photograph. Her heart stopped. Her blood turned to ice. It was Caleb. He was standing outside the brick wall of the halfway house, smoking a cigarette. His shoulders hunched against the cold. He looked thin, worried. He was unaware he was being photographed from across the street. Before she could even breathe, a second message came through. Do as I say, or your brother's next. The photo was a digital execution, a single image that severed her from all hope. Alara's breath seized in her chest. Caleb. He was outside, smoking, unaware, a target. The message that followed was a gunshot in the silence. Do as I say, or your brother's next. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. A new, terrible, cold energy flooded her. The fear was so profound it had become its own kind of strength. She was no longer a maid. She was not a victim. She was a woman watching a gun being pointed at her brother's head. She grabbed her bag. She didn't bother to clock out. She ran from the sterile, safe apartment, her mind blank of everything but a single, primal imperative. Lorenzo. She found Rico, the silent driver, standing by the black sedan. He saw the look on her face and, for the first time, his placid expression flickered with alarm. Take me to him, she commanded, her voice a low, ragged rasp she didn't recognize. Now. Rico didn't question her. He simply opened the door, got in, and drove. The ride through the city was a blur of lights and horns that she neither saw nor heard. The staff entrance was bypassed. Rico used his key card to take her up the private elevator. The doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer. Lorenzo was in his study, standing by the window, a phone to his ear. He saw her and his conversation stopped mid-sentence. Matteo, I'll call you back. He hung up. His eyes locked on her. She didn't speak. She just walked across the vast, silent room and held out the burner phone. He took it. His gaze flickered over the screen. First the picture, then the text. She watched his face. Nothing. He didn't flinch. He didn't swear. A stillness settled over him, a lethal calm that was more terrifying than any rage. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Crestview recovery, he said. It wasn't a question. She just nodded, her entire body shaking so hard her teeth chattered. He tapped a single button on his desk intercom. Matteo, my office. Matteo was there in less than 20 seconds, a shadow appearing in the doorway. Lorenzo held out the phone. Matteo looked at it, his jaw tightening. Get the brother, Lorenzo said, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion. Use the extraction team. Full security protocol. I want him in the air in 20 minutes. Take him to the estate. And I want a 2-mile perimeter. No one in or out. And Kovac? Matteo asked, his voice a low growl. He'll surface when his leverage is gone. For now, he is irrelevant. Get the boy. Go. Matteo was gone. Lorenzo turned back to Alara. She was still standing in the middle of his office, hugging herself, vibrating with unspent terror. He's safe, Lorenzo said. It was a promise. They will have him within the hour. No one will touch him. She could only nod. He led her to the leather sofa and, for the first time, pushed her gently down to sit. Wait here. He went back to his desk. He didn't comfort her. He didn't offer her a drink. He went back to work. He made calls. He spoke in low, clipped tones, discussing shipping routes, port security, and market percentages. He was an iceberg, all lethal, unseen mass beneath a calm, cold surface. And in a strange way, it was the most comforting thing he could have done. He was not panicking. He was not reacting. He was handling. He was a mountain. And this, all of this, was just a small, annoying tremor at its base. 3 hours passed. 3 hours of Alara sitting on that couch, her mind numb, listening to the quiet, deadly efficiency of his voice. The intercom buzzed. "Boss, he's secure. The asset is at the estate. He's confused, but cooperative." Lorenzo closed his eyes for a single second. Good. Double the detail. He clicked off the intercom and finally looked at her. "He's safe," he said again. "Jared cannot find him. He cannot touch him. It's done." The wave of relief was so violent it left her weak. She sagged against the cushions, the adrenaline draining away, leaving a hollow, aching guilt in its place. She looked at him, truly looked at him, at this man who had just mobilized a private army for her. The silence in the room stretched, heavy and thick. "What have I done?" she whispered, the question torn from her. He frowned, leaving his desk and coming to stand over her. "You have done nothing." "No," she said, shaking her head, the tears she'd held back now burning. "I brought this filth into your world. You have men, an organization, Mateo. He warned you. He said I was a vulnerability, and I am. I put your brother's life at risk. And now, I've put you at risk. All your people. For me. For my stupid, messy life." He watched her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he crouched in front of her, a startling move that brought him down to her level. He was no longer towering over her. He was eye to eye. "Jared Kovac is a rat," he said, his voice low and firm. "He was in my walls before I knew you. He has been a problem for longer than you know. You didn't bring this. You exposed it. You shed light on a dark corner I needed to clean. You are not a vulnerability, Alara. You are a clarification." He didn't know how to say it. He didn't have the words for what she was, but vulnerability was the wrong one. Before she could process this, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was an alert from his personal security feed. He stood, his body tensing. He glanced at the monitor on his desk. "Mateo," he said into the intercom, his voice suddenly like ice. "He's here. The garage. P2 level. He used a stolen staff card. He's in—" Alara's blood stopped. "What? Who?" "Kovac," Lorenzo said, his eyes scanning the bank of monitors. "He got in. He's in the building." Mateo's voice was clipped. "He's not on the cameras. He bypassed the main—" "He's in the service elevator shaft." Lorenzo cut him off, watching a small, grainy image flicker in the corner of one screen. "He's trying to get to the service levels. He's desperate. He thinks Caleb is here." "I'm sending the team," Mateo said. "No, lock it down." "Shut down the elevators. I want him trapped between floors. I want him taken, alive." Lorenzo cut the feed. Alara was on her feet, her hands over her mouth. "He's here? He's in the building? Now?" The one place she had felt safe, the fortress, the tower, he had breached it. He was here. "He is a rat in a steel trap," Lorenzo said, his voice tight with a controlled fury. "He's not getting out, but he's so close." The thought of him, just floors below them, of his hate, his violence, in this building, was too much. The walls, which had been her armor, suddenly felt paper thin. The air was too thin. She couldn't breathe. "Alara," he started. She didn't hear him. She turned and ran, not to the door, but to the closest, most private space she could find. She fled into his private bathroom, a cavern of dark marble and glass, and slammed the heavy door. Fumbling with the lock, she collapsed against the cold stone, the terror finally, completely breaking her. It wasn't just fear, it was violation. He had contaminated her last sanctuary. The proximity of his evil, of his touch, was more than she could bear. She slid to the floor, her body racked with dry, agonizing sobs. She was shaking so violently she felt like she was coming apart, her bones rattling against the marble. She pressed a hand to her mouth to muffle the sounds, her body curling into a tight, protective ball. She heard the click of the door. The lock was meaningless. He was there, standing in the doorway, his large frame filling the space. He didn't speak. He just looked at her, a small, broken thing, still in her gray maid's uniform, sobbing on his bathroom floor. Slowly, he walked in. He didn't reach for her. He didn't offer a hand. He just stood in front of her, his presence a solid, silent fact. He began to unbutton his suit jacket. It was dark, expensive, a piece of custom-tailored armor. He shrugged it off. He was just in his crisp white shirt and dark pants. He crouched in front of her, his knees almost touching her. She flinched, her sobs catching in her throat, her eyes wide with fear and shame. "Shh," was all he said, his voice a low rumble. He reached for her, not her face, not her arms. He reached for the top button of her cheap, gray uniform jacket, his fingers, warm and sure, undid the first button. She stared at him, uncomprehending, too terrified to move. He undid the second and the third. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost reverent. He was not undressing her. He was dismantling her. He slid the thin, worn-out uniform off her shoulders, pulling it down her arms. She was left in just her thin, white undershirt, her skin covered in goosebumps, her body still shaking. Then he took his jacket, his heavy, silk-lined, tailored suit jacket. He opened it and wrapped it around her, sliding her arms into the sleeves that were far too long, pulling the lapels closed over her chest. It engulfed her. It was heavy. It was warm from his body. It smelled of him, of that clean, expensive scent, of wool, and of pure, undeniable security. He pulled her to her feet, his hands gentle on her upper arms. The jacket hung to her knees, a dark, protective cocoon. He leaned in, his lips brushing the shell of her ear as he whispered, his voice rough. "I want you to feel safe in something that can't be torn apart." He kept one arm around her, guiding her out of the cold bathroom, away from the sight of her breakdown. He didn't take her to the living room or the bedroom. He took her to his office, his center of power. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of his desk lamp and the glittering, indifferent lights of the city beyond the glass. He sat in his large, dark leather desk chair, his throne, and then he pulled her, still wrapped in his jacket, down onto his lap. She landed stiffly, her body rigid with confusion and a new, sharp, electric awareness. She was sitting on the lap of Lorenzo Valenti. His arm was a steel band around her waist, holding her. "He's gone." "Elara," he murmured, his voice vibrating through her. "Matteo just confirmed. They have him. He's been taken from the building. He will never, ever get near you again." She looked at him. His face was only inches from hers, half in shadow. She could see the faint lines by his eyes, the hard set of his jaw. He had done it. He had saved Caleb. He had captured Jared. He had wrapped her in his own armor, the dam of her pain and her suppressed. Terrified longing didn't just break. It evaporated. She was the one who moved first. Her hand, trembling, came up to his face. His skin was rough, warm. He closed his eyes at her touch. This was her choice. She leaned in and kissed him. It was tentative at first, a desperate, clumsy press of her lips to his. But he didn't move. He just let her, his body solid and still beneath her, giving her the control. And so she kissed him again. This time it was not hesitant. It was hungry. It was a raw, aching, desperate need, a pouring out of months of pain, of fear, of loneliness, and the sudden, explosive, terrifying relief of being safe. It was a kiss that was all teeth and desperation, a frantic attempt to get closer, to ground herself to this man who was her only anchor. His stillness broke. A low sound, a growl, rumbled in his chest. His hand came up, tangling in her hair, not to pull, but to hold her, to angle her face to his. He kissed her back. It was not gentle. It was not the soft, questioning kiss on the balcony. This was possession. This was a claim. His mouth was firm, hot, and demanding, and yet, underneath it all, he was still protecting her. He took all her frantic, broken energy and met it with a deep, consuming fire that didn't burn her, but forged her. She whimpered, pressing closer, her fingers gripping the fine cotton of his shirt. Her other hand, splayed against his chest, found the solid, steady, powerful thump of his heart. She pressed her palm flat against it, holding on, finally letting herself believe, finally letting herself trust. He felt the shift in her, the moment her panic turned to surrender. His grip on her hair softened, his fingers becoming a cradle. His lips softened, the kiss changing from a consuming fire to a deep, slow, thorough exploration. He cupped her face, his thumbs stroking the high, delicate bones of her cheeks. They stayed like that for a long time, lost in the quiet glow of the office, the world outside vanishing, their breaths mingling, the only sound the steady beat of his heart under her hand. When the kiss finally broke, she didn't pull away. She couldn't. She just collapsed against him, resting her forehead on his shoulder, breathing him in. She was curled up on his lap, in his chair, in his office, wearing his jacket. She was his. After a long, quiet moment, they moved to the long leather couch against the wall. He sat, and he pulled her down with him, so she was curled against his side, her head resting on his chest, his arms wrapped tightly around her. She was still swimming in his jacket. She felt a new, cold fear creep in. This was a dream. This moment of warmth and safety was an anomaly. Tomorrow, the sun would rise, and he would be the boss again, cold and distant, and she would be... What? His pet project? His charity case? "Don't go back to being cold tomorrow," she murmured against his shirt, the words so quiet she barely heard them herself. He tensed. He shifted, tilting her chin up so she had to look at him. His eyes were dark, serious, and all the ice was gone. There was a fire there, a deep, steady warmth she had never seen. "Only the world deserves my cold," he said, his voice a low, rough vow. "My enemies, the people who try to break what I build, they get the ice." He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, his gaze holding hers. "You," he said, and his voice was raw. "You get all my warmth." It was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever said to her. The moment was perfect, absolute, and like all perfect moments, it was fragile. It was shattered by a sharp, urgent knock on the study door. "Lorenzo!" Matteo's voice called, and it was tight with an alarm that was not part of their world. "Boss, now!" Lorenzo's entire body went rigid. He gently, but quickly, sat Alara up. "Stay here." He strode to the door and opened it. Matteo was standing there, his face pale, his suit jacket gone, his breathing hard. "He's gone," Matteo said, his voice clipped. Lorenzo's face turned to stone. "What do you mean, gone?" "He was in transport." "The transport was hit," Matteo said, stepping into the room. "Hard. A professional team. 2 of our men are down. Kovac is gone." Alara, who had been watching from the couch, felt the blood drain from her face. "Gone?" she whispered. He escaped?" "This was not an escape," Lorenzo said, his voice a lethal hiss. He was looking at Matteo, but his words were for Alara. "This was an extraction. Someone took him." "We just got a report," Matteo said, his jaw working. "A patrol car found Kovac's personal car abandoned under the West Side Viaduct. There's blood inside, a lot of it, and a body. Not Kovac, one of his low-life associates, executed. It was a message." Alara was on her feet, the heavy suit jacket sliding from her shoulders and puddling on the floor. The warmth was gone. The cold was back. "He's out there," she breathed, her hands going to her mouth. He's, oh God, he's coming for me. He's coming for Caleb." "No," Lorenzo said, his voice cutting through her panic like a whip. He turned, and the man from the couch was gone. The cold, calculating boss was back. But this time, his coldness wasn't directed at her. It was directed at the world. He looked at Matteo, and a cold, terrible understanding passed between them. This, Lorenzo said, was not about the girl, not just... This was a move. He was connecting the dots, the seemingly random attacks, the boldness of the garage infiltration, the professional extraction. Jared was never the predator. He was the bait. "A deeper enemy is helping him," he said. He didn't need to say the name. Matteo said it for him. The Scalinas, the warmth of the previous night, of that desperate, claiming kiss, had evaporated. Lorenzo's office was cold again, the silence thick and heavy. Jared was gone, extracted, and the name Scalini hung in the air like an undetonated bomb. "Get me everything," Lorenzo said, his voice a low, lethal flat line. He was looking at Alara, but his words were for Matteo. I want to know where Kovac has been for the last 6 months, who he's talked to, who he's looked at. I want to know the name of the man who bought him his last cup of coffee." Matteo nodded, his face grim. "Already on it, boss. We're pulling every security feed in a 10-block radius of his last known locations. The search was meticulous, a digital excavation of a parasitic life. It took 2 days. On the 3rd day, Matteo brought the evidence to the penthouse. It was a single, grainy, time-stamped photograph from a gas station security camera. 2 weeks old, it showed Jared Kovac, looking nervous and small, leaning into the window of a dark Maserati. The man in the driver's seat was barely visible, but the large, gaudy ring on his hand was not. "Bruno Scalini," Matteo said, his voice tight. "The nephew. He's been running their street-level operations since you put his uncle away." Lorenzo stared at the image, his face carved from ice. The Scalini cartel, a rival group he had crippled 5 years ago. A bloody, protracted war that had cost him men and resources. He had cut the head off the snake. He had not anticipated the tail would still have this much poison. Elara, who had been sitting on the leather couch she and Lorenzo had shared, felt a new, colder fear. This was not about a jealous ex-boyfriend anymore. He did say something," she whispered, her voice trembling. Lorenzo's gaze snapped to her. "What?" "When he would get angry. When I told him he was going to get caught, he laughed. He said he had friends, big people. He said, 'You think your new boss is the only one in this city with power?'" She shook her head, her shame and fear mixing. I thought he was just talking. I thought he was just trying to scare me. I didn't understand. I didn't know it meant this." "It's not your fault," Lorenzo said, his voice hard. "You were his victim. Now, he's theirs. He's a tool, a disposable, stupid tool they are using to get to me." He looked at Matteo. "This changes the protocol. This is no longer containment. This is a countermove." His next words were for Elara. "You are not safe in this city, not even in this building. The Scalinis know he was here. They know he was targeting you. They will see you as a loose end, or worse, leverage." The move happened at night. There was no discussion. 2 black SUVs, manned by 4 of Lorenzo's best men, took Elara and Caleb from their secure locations. Caleb, still dazed and terrified from his own sudden extraction from the halfway house, looked at his sister with wide, accusing eyes. "What did you do?" "Elara," he'd hissed as they were put in the car. "Who are these people? This is that Mafia guy, isn't it, from the news?" "They're protecting us." "Caleb," she said, her voice hollow. "Protecting us," he shot back. "Or protecting him. We look like hostages. Elara, what did you get us into?" Their destination was a sprawling, modern Gothic estate 2 hours north of Eldoria, hidden deep in 100 acres of private wooded land. It was beautiful, sterile, and surrounded by a 12-foot electrified fence. Guards patrolled the perimeter. It was a beautiful, inescapable prison. They were given a private suite of rooms. Caleb locked himself in his, refusing to speak. Elara was left to pace the opulent, empty living room, the silence broken only by the crunch of guards' boots on the gravel paths outside. She was safe. She was also a possession, locked in a vault. Days bled into a gray, monotonous week. She felt herself fading. The woman who had kissed Lorenzo in the storm, the woman who had claimed him in his office, disappearing. She was just a package, a protected asset. On the 8th day, Lorenzo arrived. He did not come quietly. He came in a 3-car motorcade, a visible display of power. He was the boss, visiting his fortress. He found her in the library, staring out the window at the woods. "You're safe here," he said, his voice filling the quiet room. He was in a perfect dark suit, the armor back in place. "I'm a prisoner," she replied, not turning. He was silent for a moment. "You are being protected. I am being kept," she said, turning to face him. Her eyes were bright, not with tears, but with a new, cold fire. "I'm not me. Here, I'm just a thing, a problem you've stored away. I sit, I eat, I sleep, I wait. Just like I did with Jared. The cage is just bigger, the walls are more expensive. He frowned, a flicker of something. Respect in his dark eyes. What would you have me do? Let you walk out there? Let the Scalinis find you? I want to go back to work, she said, the words sharp. He almost laughed. That is not possible. Then give me something to do, she insisted, stepping closer. Don't you understand? This passivity. This is what he wants. It's what he's always wanted. For me to be small, to be scared, to be nothing. I sat in this room for 8 days, and I let him win. I won't do it. I won't let fear take everything away from me. Not anymore. He looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw the fire he had first glimpsed on the balcony. He saw the strength that had allowed her to survive. He had been protecting the victim. He had failed to see the survivor. You cannot go back to the penthouse, he said, his voice softer. It is the one place they are watching. But you are right. You are not a prisoner. He paused, a plan forming. The estate has a full staff. It needs a manager, someone to oversee the household, the books, a position of trust. She stared at him. You want me to be a maid here? No, he said, a faint, almost smile touching his lips. I want you to be the boss. My legal team cleared Caleb's name 2 days ago. We found the original police report, the victim of the theft. Her testimony clears your brother completely. He's a free man. He can leave whenever he wishes. He stepped closer. But you, I am asking you to stay. Not as my protected asset, as my partner. Run this house for me. That night, Alara could not sleep. Her brother was free. She had a purpose. She was the manager of the Valenti estate, but Lorenzo was gone, back to the city, back to the war, and she was alone. She was in her new, large bedroom, the silence oppressive. She was wearing one of his sweatshirts, a thick, dark gray hoodie she had stolen from his closet in the penthouse. It was too large, the sleeves hanging past her hands. It smelled like him. She paced the room, her hand clutching something hard and cold in her pocket, his ring, a heavy, gold signet ring, carved with the Valenti crest. She had taken it from his desk that last day, a moment of defiant theft. She had needed a piece of him, a piece of his strength. She finally crawled into the massive bed, the hoodie soft against her skin. She curled onto her side, pulling the ring from her pocket. She clutched it in her hand, the metal heavy, the carved crest digging into her palm. It was a token, a promise. She held it to her chest and, for the first time in a week, she fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. She did not hear the window on the far side of the room slide open. Lorenzo moved through the darkness like a shadow. He had bypassed his own security, using a blind spot in the camera coverage and a climbing route he'd mapped years ago. He had not wanted to arrive as the boss again, in a motorcade, with his men. He had just needed to see her. He stood by her bed, watching her in the pale moonlight. She was lost in the bed, looking small and impossibly young. She was drowning in his hoodie, and then he saw it. Her left hand, curled on the pillow by her face, was clutching his signet ring, holding it like a child held a charm against the dark. A raw, protective, and profoundly tender emotion tightened his chest. He had seen her strength. Now he was seeing her vulnerability. She was not just fighting. She was holding on to him to get through it. He sat on the edge of the bed, his weight barely disturbing the mattress. He reached out, his hand, roughened by his work, impossibly gentle. He stroked the soft, wayward hair from her face. She stirred, a soft murmur escaping her, but she didn't wake. He leaned down, his lips brushing the warm skin of her forehead, a chaste, possessive, desperate kiss. Soon, he whispered, his voice a raw breath in the darkness. Soon this will all be over, I promise you. He watched her for another hour, a silent, dark guardian, before disappearing back into the night. Back in Eldoria, the war was taking a new, insidious turn. They're not just watching, Matteo said, his voice tight. He was in the penthouse study, holding a small, black, sophisticated-looking piece of plastic. They're listening. Lorenzo looked at the device. It was a military-grade audio bug. We swept the P2 garage, Like you said, Matteo continued, his face grim. We found this, tucked inside the conduit box, right where Kovac was captured, and we found another one in the service corridor he used. The pieces clicked into place, forming a cold, ugly picture. He wasn't trying to get to Alara, Lorenzo said, the words like ice. He was a diversion. He created chaos. He drew our security to him, so he could plant this. He was a Trojan horse. He was bait, and he was the operative, Matteo agreed. The Scalinis used his obsession with her as the perfect cover. He could get into places none of their men ever could. A disgruntled ex, seeking revenge. Our security was looking for a man. They weren't looking for a spy. Lorenzo's fury was a cold, quiet, absolute thing. He had been played. The Scalinis had used Alara's pain to infiltrate his home. They had turned his protection of her into a weapon against him. Now, they were listening for his plans, for his weaknesses, for any mention of the estate. Then we will give them something to listen to, Lorenzo said, a dark, dangerous plan forming in his mind. They want Kovac? They can have him, and we will get them. He needed Alara, not the victim, not the manager. He needed the survivor. He explained the plan to her in the secure study at the estate. She sat perfectly still, her face pale, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. You want me to lure him, she said, her voice flat. We need him, Lorenzo said, his voice gentle but firm. He's the only one who can concretely tie the Scalinis to the infiltration, and they will not let him live. He knows too much. He's a loose end. His only chance is us. Your only chance is this. You want me to pretend to run away with him. We will make it look real, Lorenzo said. You will use your old burner phone. We know they are monitoring his communications. You will send him a message. You're scared. You've stolen money from me. You want out. You want him to help you disappear. You'll offer him half. He'll never believe it, well, she whispered, her fear a cold knot in her stomach. He will, Lorenzo said, his gaze unwavering. His ego won't let him believe anything else. He will see a chance to get you, to get my money, and to be a hero to his new bosses all at once. He won't be able to resist. And the Scalinis? They will be listening, Lorenzo said, and they will not let that much money walk away. They will send their own men to secure the package. That is when we take them all. She was terrified. He was asking her to be bait, to walk into a room with the man who had brutalized her. She looked at him, at his strong, set face, the man who had kissed her forehead in the dark, the man who had promised her his warmth. All right, she said, her voice shaking but her eyes steady. I'll do it. The trap was set for a hotel, the Eldoria Grand. Neutral, public, but easily controlled. Lorenzo's team had booked the entire floor, replacing hotel staff, embedding surveillance in every room. Alara was in the suite, alone. She was wearing a simple dress, a bag at her feet, supposedly full of cash. She was shaking, but her face was set, in her ear. A tiny, invisible piece of technology fed her Lorenzo's voice. He's in the elevator. He's coming up. Remember, you are in control. I am right next door. I will not let him touch you. Lorenzo and Matteo were in the adjoining suite, surrounded by monitors. Lorenzo's hand was on the grip of a weapon he had not carried in years. He was coiled, a predator forced to wait. The door to Alara's suite opened. It was Jared. He looked terrible. He was thin, pale, his eyes wide and haunted, darting around the room. He was not the confident abuser he had been. He was a rat, and he knew he was in a trap. Alara, he hissed, his voice cracking. You came. You got the money? It's here, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Jared, I'm scared. We have to go. Yeah, we'll go. He was licking his lips, his eyes on the bag, and then the door opened again. Jared hadn't come alone. 2 large men in cheap, ill-fitting suits stepped in behind him. They were not Jared's type. They were muscle. They were Scalini enforcers. Kovac, the larger one said, his voice like gravel. You did good. Now where's the money? Jared's face went white. I told you. She brought it. The enforcer looked at Alara, a cold, dead-eyed stare. The boss says to clean up, the girl and him." He pulled a long, thin knife from his jacket. "Lorenzo, now!" Alara screamed. The door to the adjoining suite exploded open. It wasn't a request, it was an invasion. Lorenzo, Matteo, and two of his men burst in. The room, so quiet seconds before, erupted into violence. Matteo, a blur of motion, met the first enforcer. His movements precise and brutal. The other two men took the second. Jared, a coward to his core, grabbed the only person he could. He lunged for Alara, pulling her in front of him, the knife in his hand, pressing the flat of the blade to her throat. "Stay back! Valenti!" he screamed, his voice a terrified shriek. "Stay back or I'll cut her! I swear to God!" Alara froze, the cold steel against her skin. Lorenzo stopped. He was 10 feet away. His eyes were not on Jared. They were on Alara. They were cold, calm, and assessing. "Let her go, Jared," he said, his voice reasonable. "No, you're going to kill me." "You're right," Lorenzo said, but not if you let her go." Jared was frantic, his eyes darting between Lorenzo and Matteo, who had subdued his man. He was trapped. He pressed the knife harder. Lorenzo moved. He didn't lunge. He didn't charge. He took 1, 2, 3 fast, deliberate steps. He was not going for the knife. He was going for her. Jared saw him coming and his hand spasmed, the blade turning, ready to slice. Lorenzo didn't stop. He slammed into Alara, his arms wrapping around her, shoving her, throwing her out of the way. He put his own body, his side, his arm, where she had been. Alara hit the floor. Her breath knocked out of her. She looked up in time to see the knife meant for her neck, rake hard and deep. Across Lorenzo's left forearm, a long, vivid, crimson line appeared. Lorenzo didn't make a sound. He didn't even flinch. The pain was an irrelevance. Before Jared could pull the knife back, before he could even register what had happened, Lorenzo's right hand shot out and clamped around Jared's wrist. The sound of bone snapping was sharp. A crack in the room that was louder than a gunshot. The knife clattered to the plush carpet. Jared screamed, a high, thin sound. Lorenzo's other hand, his left, now streaming blood, balled into a fist. He hit Jared once, a single, short, brutal, devastating punch to the solar plexus. All the air, all the fight, all the pathetic, venomous energy left Jared Kovac. He collapsed at Lorenzo's feet, a boneless, broken, whimpering heap. It was over. Silence fell, broken only by Jared's pathetic sobbing and the sound of dripping. Alara stared, her eyes fixed on Lorenzo's arm. The blood, dark and red, was pouring from the gash, soaking his white shirt, dripping onto the carpet. He stood over Jared's body, breathing heavily. The boss, the protector, the victor, bleeding for her. The hotel room was a strange, silent tableau of violence. The air, thick with the metallic tang of blood and the scent of adrenaline, was now pierced by the distant, approaching wail of sirens. Jared Kovac was a whimpering, broken mess on the floor, clutching his shattered wrist. The two Scalini enforcers were bound, silent and bleeding. Matteo was calmly wiping down the door handle, his movements economical. Lorenzo stood in the center of the room, his white shirt sleeve a ruin of crimson. The cut on his forearm was deep, a brutal gash, but he seemed entirely indifferent to it. He was looking at Alara. She was on the floor where he had thrown her, staring at the blood, at him. "Get her out of here," Lorenzo said to one of his men. "No," Alara whispered, scrambling to her feet. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a sudden, protective clarity. She walked straight to him, her hands trembling, and looked at the wound. "You're bleeding. My God. Lorenzo, you're hurt." "It's nothing," he said, his voice a low growl. But his eyes, dark and intense, were fixed on her, assessing, ensuring she was unharmed. "It is not nothing." She grabbed a clean, white hotel towel from a nearby rack and pressed it, hard, against the cut. He winced, a sharp intake of breath, but he didn't pull away. He just let her, his arm rigid, as she wrapped the towel tightly, her knuckles white. "The police," Matteo said quietly from the door. "They're 2 blocks out. We're clear." Lorenzo's men were shadows. They hauled the 2 bound enforcers to their feet. They did not touch Jared. "What about him?" Alara asked, her voice small, still clutching the towel to Lorenzo's arm. "He's a gift," Lorenzo said, his voice cold. He looked down at the pathetic man on the floor. "He is the key." One of Lorenzo's men dropped a small, unregistered handgun near Jared's good hand. Matteo kicked the knife, the one that had cut Lorenzo, over to it, on the table. A burner phone, preloaded with calls to the Scalini enforcers, sat next to Alara's bag of cash. "They'll find him with the weapon, the phone, and 2 known Scalini operatives," Lorenzo said, his voice flat. "A drug deal, a territorial dispute. Gone wrong, he'll talk, he'll sing, he'll give them the Scalinis to try and save himself. He's no longer our problem." The sirens were close now. A scream in the street below. Lorenzo's men and their captives were gone, disappearing down a service stairwell. "Lorenzo, we have to go," Matteo urged. Lorenzo nodded. He put his good hand on Alara's back and guided her to the adjoining door. But she stopped. She turned, pulling away from him, and looked back. Jared was still on the floor, sobbing, as the first heavy footsteps of police officers pounded down the hotel hallway. Their shadows appeared under the door. Alara watched as the door burst open and uniformed officers swarmed the room, their voices sharp, their guns drawn. "Get on the ground! Show me your hands! Show me your hands!" She saw the moment they found Jared. She saw the confusion, the weapons, the shouting, and she saw him, her tormentor, the ghost of her past, cowering, finally, hopelessly, caught. A sob, a great, heaving, agonizing sound tore from her chest. It was not a sob of fear. It was a sob of release. It was the sound of years of terror, of pain, of running, of silence. Finally, leaving her body. The chains that had wrapped around her for so long did not just break, they dissolved. She trembled, her legs giving out. Lorenzo was there. He had been waiting. His uninjured arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her from the doorway into the safety of the other suite. He didn't just hold her, he cradled her, pulling her tightly against his chest as the door clicked shut, muffling the sounds of the arrest. He held her as she shook, his large hand stroking her hair, his chin resting on the top of her head. He was a solid, warm, breathing wall of security. "It's over," he whispered, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "Shh, it's done. You're safe." She clutched his shirt, her tears soaking the fabric over his heart. "He's gone," she wept. "He's finally gone." "Yes," Lorenzo said, his voice rough with an emotion she had never heard. He held her face, tilting her chin up. His dark eyes were fierce, possessive, and impossibly tender. "You never have to fear him again. I swear it." The next morning, Alara was taken back to the estate. Lorenzo did not come with her. He had gone to have his arm properly stitched. A long, angry line of black thread that would undoubtedly become a scar. Alara sat in the vast, silent library, waiting. She did not know what she was waiting for. She heard a car on the gravel, not a motorcade, a single car. She ran to the window. It was Lorenzo's private sedan. He got out, his arm in a stark white sling, but he was not alone. He opened the back door, and someone else got out. Caleb. Alara's breath hitched. She ran, her feet flying over the marble floor, out the heavy front doors. Caleb stood on the gravel, blinking in the bright sunlight. He looked thin and tired, but he was smiling, a real, wide, uncomplicated smile. "Alara," he said. She slammed into him, her arms wrapping around his neck, and for the first time, she held her brother as a free woman. "It's over. Caleb," she cried into his shoulder. "It's all over." "I know," he said, his voice thick. He hugged her back, lifting her off the ground. They told me. Lorenzo's lawyers. They met me this morning. The old charges. They're gone. Wiped. The original theft victim. They found her. She testified. It was Jared. It was all Jared. They cleared my name." Alara pulled back, her face streaked with tears of joy. She looked at Lorenzo, who was standing back, watching them, his face unreadable but his eyes soft. You did it," she said to him. You said you would? You saved him." "I restored the truth," Lorenzo said simply. He walked over to Caleb and offered his good hand. "You are free to go. Caleb, a car is waiting to take you wherever you wish. We have secured a new apartment for you in the city, and a fund to get you started." Caleb looked at this dangerous, powerful man, this mafia boss who had upended his life and then given it back to him, better than before. He shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Mr. Valenti," Caleb said, his voice full of a new, adult gravity. "For everything. For taking care of my sister. She," Lorenzo said, his gaze shifting to Alara, "took care of herself. I just removed the obstacles." The fallout from the hotel incident was a tremor in Eldoria. The Valenti name was in the papers, associated with a violent, high-profile arrest, rumors of a new brewing war with the Scalini cartel, who were furious at the loss of their men and their operative, circulated in the underworld. But the rumors died. The Scalinis, exposed and crippled by the testimony of their own enforcers and a now cooperative Jared Kovac, were under federal investigation. Lorenzo had not started a war. He had ended one, cleanly and decisively, in his own circle. His status grew. His men had seen him put himself on the line, had seen him take a knife for a woman who was, to them, a nobody. It was not seen as weakness. It was seen as the ultimate display of loyalty. It proved that his protection, once given, was absolute. He had bled for his own. It made his inner circle admire him, and his enemies fear him even more. Alara had spent 2 weeks at the estate with Caleb, healing, breathing, learning what it felt like to not be afraid. They talked. They laughed. For the first time in years, they were just a brother and sister. Then, one evening, she went to Lorenzo. He was in the study, his arm now free of the sling, the scar a dark red line against his skin. "He's leaving tomorrow," Alara said quietly. "Caleb, he's going to try and start over, in a new city. That is a wise choice," Lorenzo said, looking up from his work. "I'm leaving, too," she said. His focus sharpened. He set his pen down. "I have secured the penthouse. It is the safest place in the city. You will—" "No," she said, her voice soft, but unbreakable. "Not the penthouse, not the estate. I can't. I'm not your asset anymore. I'm not your project. I'm not your maid." "What are you?" "Alara," he asked, his voice low. "I don't know," she said, and it was the most honest thing she'd ever said. "And I need to find out. On my own, I got a job as a receptionist at a small clinic, and I found a small apartment downtown. It's not much, but it's mine." He stood, his face a mask of stone. She had expected him to argue, to command, to forbid. This was the test. She was walking away from his protection, from his wealth. He was silent for a full minute, his gaze searching her face. He was looking for a crack, for hesitation. He found none. He saw a woman who was terrified, but who was moving forward anyway. He nodded. Once. "Rico will drive you," he said. "Lorenzo. No, He will drive you," Lorenzo interrupted, his voice firm but not angry. "He will take you to your new apartment. Now he will check the security. He will give you a new phone, and then he will leave you alone. You will be on your own, but you will be safe." He stepped closer, his gaze intense. "I respect this. I respect you." The small apartment was one room, with a tiny kitchen and a bathroom, but the main window had a view of a park. It was the most beautiful place she had ever lived. Weeks passed. She went to work. She bought groceries. She paid her own bills. She learned to sleep through the night without flinching at every sound. She learned who Alara was. She was quiet. She was kind. She was surprised to discover. Funny. And she was strong. She missed him. She missed him with an ache that was physical, but it was a clean ache, one of longing, not of need. She did not need him to be safe. She just wanted him. One night, 6 weeks after she had moved in, there was a knock on her door. It was late, almost 10 o'clock. Her heart did not pound with fear. It pounded with something else. She looked through the peephole. He was there. Lorenzo. He was not in a suit. He was wearing dark jeans and a simple black sweater, the one she had first seen him in. He looked normal. He looked human. He looked, she realized with a jolt, nervous. His hand was raised, as if to knock again, but he hesitated. She unlocked the door and opened it. He stood there, his large frame seeming to fill her tiny hallway. He said nothing. Alara smiled, a small, shy but genuinely happy smile. "Well," she teased, her voice light, "you're not my boss anymore. I don't have to let you in." His eyes, which had been so dark and guarded, softened. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth. "No," he said, his voice a low, rough sound that vibrated through her. "I'm something worse." "Oh, and what's that?" He took a step. Crossing the threshold into her small, warm apartment, he stopped just inches from her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from him. "I'm in love with you," he said. The words hit her, not with force, but with a profound, quiet weight. It was not a confession of weakness. It was a statement of absolute, undeniable truth. "I tried," he continued, his voice raw, his eyes searching her face. "I tried to stay away, to respect your space, to let you find yourself. But I am a selfish man, Alara, and I find that I am not myself. Without you, I am not whole." She didn't know how to respond. Her heart was a drum, loud in the silence of the room, so she did the only thing she could. She rose on her toes and kissed him. It was not the hesitant kiss in the storm. It was not the desperate, frantic kiss in his office. This was a kiss of equals. It was a kiss of choice. His reaction was immediate. His arms, his strong, scarred arms, wrapped around her waist, locking her to him. He pulled her so tight she could barely breathe, lifting her feet from the floor. He kissed her back with a lifetime of suppressed hunger, a consuming, passionate, and yet achingly tender kiss that was all about her. Her hands, which had been on his shoulders, gripped his sweater, her fingers curling into the soft wool. She held on, not for protection, but as an anchor, pouring every ounce of her own love, her own longing, her own hard-won freedom into that single, perfect, emotionally charged kiss. Their hearts were thudding, a frantic, syncopated rhythm, one against the other, when he finally let her down. He was breathing heavily, his forehead resting against hers. His eyes were closed. "Lorenzo," she whispered, her voice trembling. He pulled back, just enough to look at her. His face was stripped of all its armor, all its coldness. He was just a man, in love, and it was the most beautiful, powerful thing she had ever seen. And then he did something that shattered her world. He let go of her, took one step back, and he knelt. Lorenzo Valenti, the boss, the king, knelt on the cheap wooden floor of her tiny apartment. "Lorenzo, what are you doing?" she gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. He took his good hand and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, simple, black velvet box. He opened it. There was no gaudy, massive diamond. It was a simple, elegant ring, a single, perfect stone that shone with a clean, clear light. "I spent my life protecting things," he said, his voice rough, his gaze locked on hers. "My family, my business, my name. And then I started protecting you." He took a breath. "But I don't want to protect you anymore. Alara, not like that. I want to stand beside you. I want to build with you. I want to wake up with you. This..." He gestured with the box. This isn't about protection anymore. It's not about security. It's about choosing you. Every day. For the rest of my life. If you'll have me." Tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling. They were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. This was not the frightened maid. This was not the victim. This was not a woman being saved. This was a woman being chosen. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Yes, it's not out of fear. It's because I love you, too." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He stood, pulling her into his arms, and held her, just held her, his face buried in her hair. The final image was not of that small apartment. It was weeks later, a warm evening. Elara was standing on the vast open-air balcony of the penthouse. The city of Eldoria glittered below her, a sea of diamonds. The wind was soft, not threatening. She was wearing a simple, elegant silk dress, the ring on her hand catching the light. She was not a maid. She was not a prisoner. She was not afraid. Lorenzo came out, his arm now scarred. Sliding around her waist, pulling her back against his chest, he said nothing, just rested his chin on her shoulder. She leaned back against him, his warmth her home, his heart beating steadily against her back. She looked out at the city that had once terrified her, and she smiled. She was, finally, just free. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Where in the world are you listening from? Please let us know in the comments below. We would love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories for more new chapters. And please share your thoughts on the story with us in English. We read every comment.